Welcome to Wire Guild. This is a lovely tutorial, a long tutorial, but the pieces of jewellery you can make from it are really beautiful. As you can see, this is the main piece. This is our pendant, and for this I used a 28mm Swarovski element pendant focal bead, some 2mm Swarovski beads. I also used a few pearls thrown in there. I haven't written those down, I don't know why, naughty girl. And 1.6 or 14 gauge round wire, 0.8mm or 20 gauge round wire, and some 0.4 or 26 gauge round wire. Now everything I've used I've done in silver, and what I've decided to do is show you how I do the design process. Now I usually leave this out because not everybody can draw, not everybody wants to draw. My drawings aren't brilliant, but I drew around the focal bead, and really what I'm trying to do is get some sense of balance with the design. I'm going to put like a vine and leaves on it, so by drawing it I can get a rough idea of how many leaves will look right, like it fits. Now I aren't going to follow this sort of slavishly. It will just be an idea, and as I draw I play with the beads that I'm using. I look at them, I pick them up, I put them down, and I just sort of add bits in as and when. That's sort of for the chain and the beads, but like I say, it's more for the balance of how I'm going to put things in. I've got 7 leaves, and I think that's a really nice amount. It's sort of 7 leaves, so that's what I'm going to use. Now I could use some Viking weave, which is what I've got here, and through the centre, but I don't really like it that much. So what I'm doing is I am using a thicker bar, which is 1.6mm, and I'm going to hang my pendant from that, because if I use something like this, which is 1mm or 0.8mm, so 20 gauge, 18 gauge, it's not heavy enough. It just wouldn't look right, not with such a huge sort of focal drop on the end. So that's about the right length. I'm taking into consideration that I need to put loops on either end, and I'm going to cut this through. Now I've got about 6 inch, so that's about 15 centimeters. Ooh, take some cutting as that, you need sharp snips. If you don't have this, I would suggest you put 2 pieces of 0.8 together and twist them. You would get a similar effect, and you maintaining the strength. Now then, that's quite smooth, is that, so I can just curl that over. This is where having something like wubbers comes in really handy, because as you can see, this is really quite tough to bend. So keep going all the way around until it touches. Lovely. Now do remember to put your bead on before you curl the other end, because otherwise you'll be a little bit stuck. Alright, so let's look at where the curl on the other end is pointing. I need to get this at the same... oh, I've got a sharp bit, let me just trim that. There we go. As you can see, it was only a tiny bit, but I can just pop that in my scrap pot. Now I'm going to put my curl in the other end, and I want it to go the same way as the original curl. I don't mean the same way as in left or right, I'm meaning on the same plane, so that when you're wearing this on the neck, both of these sit flat against your chest. So let's just... ooh, it doesn't want to go at this end, it's really tough. Ooh, it's a good job I've got strong hands. Bit more. Go on, over you go. I'm only... I'm just trying to shoot people with it. Right, let's have a look. If I lay this down, it's not quite touching, isn't that? So just go a little further. There we go. How's that one? Now can you see how one's sort of sticking up? There. So if I just put my pliers in, smooth it round, I can then get a hold, because it's not quite level, and push and twist just a little bit. That's it. So they both sit on the same plane. Now straight's not right good, so let's get a curve in here, because it's meant to look like something that's growing, and unless you've got birch trees, they very rarely grow in absolute straight lines. So let's get a nice curve there, and the same in the other side. There we go. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Put that on one side. Now we're going to work on doing the trailing vine that's got the leaves on it, and this is going to wrap over the top of that piece. So I've got some 0.8 wire or 20 gauge, perfectly strong enough, and I've actually probably got about 16 inches, which is probably about 40 centimeters, and I'm starting by just putting a bend in, ease that side, ease that side. So I'm making a leaf shape. So I want come here, I want that tip of the leaf to be sharp. So squeeze that up with my pliers, open it back up again, and then I can either put my finger inside and sort of shape it around my finger. I could use the end of my round nose pliers, or I could use the other end of the pliers, the soft squidgy bit that you hold on to, and I just manipulate the wire until I've got a leaf shape that I like. Just straighten that end up. There's a lot of fiddling with this, but the great thing about them is no two leaves have to be the same, so you don't need to worry. Now, how does that size look against the wire? This is what I want. I don't want it too big, I don't want it to bury the wire, but I want to be able to see that they're actually leaves. So I think we can make it a little fatter, but possibly a little shorter. So I'll fiddle with it again. Once I've got it to the size I want, let me just open that end up ever so slightly, using my round nose pliers to sort of push in there to make it open up. How are we doing? We're getting leaf shape? Yeah, that's kind of leaf shape. Now, how does that look? It's a little smaller now, a little fatter, a little shorter, and it looks, to me, better. So I'm going to take my 0.4mm or 26 gauge, and I'm using fine silver as opposed to sterling, and I'm just going to bend that back. This is just where they touch, you know, where the wire's crossed over, so that I can get in with that finer wire and I'm not having to thread through. I've left myself a tail of probably about an inch, so 2.5 centimeters. Whoops, to detach that, I hadn't actually cut it off. It's not an exact science. So let's have my fine wire back in that end, and like I said, I'm going to leave myself a little tail. You'll see what the little tail is for later. Well, you will if the whole thing doesn't just hit the camera, and there we go. So I'm right in the very, very, very end of my leaf, and I'm going to wrap around and wrap. You see how much easier it is now? I've bent those two wires sort of out of the way where they were crossing, because it gives me an open path to go through. I'm holding on to that little tail that I had, and I'm going to wrap around, push down with my thumbnail. That's it, and I've gone around and around again, because I'm going around twice. Sorry, I'm really in my own way here with the little kink. If you get any kink in your wire, always take it out before it tightens. Back through the middle, and then up and around the other side. This is like a figure of 8. If you're not sure, there is a skill set in the free section on weaving. Have a look at this, because this is just a basic weave, and I'm just going round twice. 1, and bringing it round. Come on. 2. Hold that little tail, and through the middle. Now, with something like this, which is quite small, You want your weaving to be as tight as possible. This is why we're going around twice. It's easier to get a tight, neat weave if we go around twice. And you can see that each time I am pressing down with my thumbnail, making sure that it absolutely, and my index finger, stays pushed right in. While we're on the side of the leaf where it's getting larger, so we started at the little tiny narrow point, I've got another kink in there. We started at the small point and the wires are going apart, so the gap in the middle is getting larger. That is the easiest piece to weave, so the bit that I'm doing now is the easiest bit. I'm having to sort of fight with myself because unfortunately with the camera in the way I'm having to change hands all the time. Instead of, you wouldn't need to do this, you could just use your non-dominant hand to hold the tip of the leaf and your dominant hand would do the weaving in and out, and you wouldn't have to swap over like that, like the way I'm doing. When I get to the largest part of the leaf, I will start on the down slope or the decrease, so my leaf is getting smaller. The gap in between the two frame wires is becoming smaller, and that is the more difficult piece to weave. You'll find that your wires want to slip down. Instead of staying absolutely parallel going across your leaf, they will try and go diagonal and one wire will slip. So you have to make sure that each time that you're pushing with your fingers so that your wires stay right next to the ones before them. Otherwise you'll get like a loose or baggy or little holes, bits missing. And the whole point, I mean, if you're doing something like this, it's probably going to be for a really, really special occasion. And so you want everything to be as, you know, as perfect as you can get it. It's worth having a little bit of a practice beforehand. Maybe use some cheaper wire, use some copper wire, or use some plated. Now can you see how I've got twists here? I'm just going to undo those before they become tight, because if they get tight you can't get them out. So bring back my little leaf and wrap around. There we go. So I left myself maybe 2 or 3 inches at one end, created my leaf, doing the weaving very awkwardly. Won't be as hard for you, backwards and forwards, but it's worth spending that little bit more time and knowing that your little leaves are perfect. It's the whole focus of the piece. I know you've got a huge stone in the middle of this pendant, but believe me, it's the leaves that people see. The Swarovski is gorgeous and stunning, but it really is. If you've got lovely weaving, it does attract the eye. Now if you don't want to make this in silver, being too expensive, you can make it in copper and it looks wonderful, using something very, very rich as your focal stone. Maybe as a nice labradorite drop, or you can get some very cheap, it's not particularly great quality, but you can get some cheap rubies these days which do look wonderful with the copper, and then you can oxidize it down. Can you see how I'm pushing back all the time? Because we are on the downward slope now and it is trying to move there. Shove it back up and bring it around. Yeah, so like I said, the rubies with the copper look absolutely amazing. But then again, so does the labradorite. It's one of those things, what you like, or you could go for a Swarovski like I've done, but go for a really rich colour. I think the warm tones of the copper suit dark stones so much better. And you could make this into something very, very, very dramatic to go with things like that. Just untwiddle again. It's because I'm swapping from one hand to the other. This is why I'm tying things in knots all the time. But the fine silver that I'm using, so 999 silver as opposed to 925, is very forgiving. It's a lot more forgiving than sterling. Now if you wanted, you could use something like argentium, or I'm trying to think what the other one's called, continuum. You could use those, because you could then sort of cook your leaves, particularly if you used a piece of glass or a piece of stone that would stand the heat. It can be put in a low oven, and sort of the whole thing firms up and welds to itself, so there'd be no chance of anything coming apart. Personally, I don't bother, but argentium has other benefits. It doesn't tarnish as much. So I'm still pushing up, and you can see it's taking me quite a long time to do this leaf. Obviously it wouldn't take me as long if I didn't have the camera in the way, but you still got to consider this is a how would you call it, a work heavy piece, if you like. It does take a lot more time to make this necklace. Let's just press that back again. You can see when I get to a certain point I start using pliers to press back rather than my fingers. There we go. We're virtually at the point now where the two wires are coming together and they are touching on that little corner bit. So what I will do is press that down again. Don't be tempted to think, oh, I'm nearly there, I'll finish it off, because then you might end up with a little loose bit just near the top, and it's you know, there's no point in spoiling the ship for an ape of the tar, as my grandfather would say. Don't really know what it means, but anyway. So we'll wrap in this all the way till you get to the point where they are touching and you're keeping it tight. And I'm just going to then tuck that in. I think I can get another one in. I will get in as many as I can before I've got to the... I'll squeeze that up. Yeah, I can't get any more now. Very tight weave, pretty little leaf shape, and then I'm going to take this end and I'm just going to wrap it around sort of 3 or 4 times around one of the stems. I've gone for the easy one so that I'm not having to swap hands all the time, so I've gone for the shorter one, and then I will trim that off as close as I can get. Come on, snips, there we go, and smooth that little end down with a pair of pliers. Let me just get that wire out of the way. So I'll put the pliers over the top and I'll just smooth that down, sort of rubbing it the way it was already going. And there, our first leaf. Now remember the little tail that we left right at the beginning? What I'm going to do with this little tail is I'm just going to straighten that out, and then I'm going to get out my 2mm beads. Now I'm not going to pour these all over the surface because otherwise they will go everywhere. Let me just get that staple out before I stab myself with it, because I will do. Now rather than just digging one of these out and putting it in and messing about with it, I'm actually going to pour these into that little pot that I've got there, and then with any luck I won't spill them everywhere. Right then, so this little end that I've got, I'm just going to put one of these tiny beads down onto that wire, take the wire across the leaf. Now you could leave it at the bottom like that and it would look like a dewdrop on the bottom, but I like to wrap it across the leaf like this. That single wire then looks a little bit like the central vein on the leaf, and your little tiny Swarovski crystal looks like a little teeny dewdrop. So I'm just going to wrap that end around on the other side. So you remember the first wire I finished off on the short end? Well, this one I'm going to finish off on the longer length, so there's just a little bit of extra wrapping on both sides. Let me just press that down and tuck it in. Make sure that it's nice and smooth and you've got no sticky up bits. You don't want sticky up bits. There we go. Right. That is our first leaf. Now, whoops, sorry, I'm just dropping things everywhere. So we've got a little leaf, it's nice and woven, we've got a dewdrop which is a crystal on it, and then I'm going to move on a couple of inch so that I've got some room to wrap this onto the thicker wire that we've got with our crystal on it. So yeah, there's a couple of inch, allow a little bit more for the leaf, grab hold, put a nice sharp bend in. I'm going to tighten up that end because I like a nice, you know, sort of sharp point to my leaves. If you want a rounded end in a leaf, you can do that. Then I'm going to go in, open that up slightly to create my leaf shape, cross the wires over and play with it until I've got a leaf. Let's have a look. There we are. Just twiddle that with my fingers a little bit. Fiddle with it. Doesn't have to be exactly the same size. In fact, I think they're better if they do vary slightly, and it doesn't have to be the same shape. Again, better if they don't. And I've bent those now so that it's just going to touch on the corners, and I'm going to do the weaving exactly the same as I weave the first one. I'll put the wire in at the tip and wrap all the way around and put the bead on. So there's the second one that I've done. Looks like a little pair of weird ears, doesn't it? So I've moved on another couple of inches, giving myself a little bit extra for the leaf, and I'm going to put another bend in, and I'm going to keep doing that until I have got, come here, so put my bend in, and I'll keep doing it until I've got 7 leaves. Now if you've wanted to make your firm wire that's through your Swarovski crystal larger, you'd need more leaves, but I've done 7, so let's have a look. So there's my lump of wire, and there are my 7 leaves, and they're all slightly different, and they've all got a little crystal on, and there's bigger gaps and smaller gaps. It's not, I haven't measured and said there's going to be this much gap between each. I have allowed myself a little bit of leeway to make it look that little bit more natural. So now we are going to look at our leaves and whether we want something else like this. This is a pretty little pearl centered flower, and I'm going to show you how to make those because I think they're rather nice. So I've got my 0.4mm wire again, and you could use the end of your round nose pliers like I'm going to, but if you don't want to, you could use like the end of a pencil or a pen, or I've got the tool that I use, you know, for poking holes in my weaving. I could use that. It's a little bit bigger than that, so I'm going to use my pliers. I always use my pliers, so I'm going to just hold them like that, put the wire, give myself a couple of inch wrap, 1, 2, make sure it pushes right up to the top. You'll usually stop against the square bit of wire that's there. 2, 3, I need 5, I haven't got enough wire there, so I'm just going to turn it round and I'll use the other end. There we go, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. There might be 6 there actually, I'm not sure how many I put in there, but 5 or 6. It's a flower, it's alright. So I've pushed it back on and I'm going to twist the 2 ends together. So I'm going to do that with my pliers to make sure it's nice and tight, because it'll often get it tighter than my fingers can. And then you've got this little row of loops and 2 ends. Let me just cut that off the reel, because there we go. Now then, what I need to do is, from that twisted bit, I'm just twisting it a bit tighter, is take the first of your curls and bend it down, and then take the second one and bend it down, but bend it slightly, come on you little thing, squidge to one side. Can you see like that? Good. And then the third one, which I will ease round a bit further. So all you're doing is you're opening these little curls up, so that you're going to end up, these are the petals, if you like, of our flower. We'll just keep moving them around on there, and then you can give them a bit of a shuffle if you need to. There. Lovely. So there's your flower. I might have 7 leaves even. Really, I can't count. And I'm just curving those up a little bit, so that they're more like a flower than a flat open daisy. I want them to curl up a bit. So now really we need to think about throwing them away, putting something in the middle. And I've got these little lumpy freshwater pearls. I'm taking the longer of the 2 pieces of wire up into the top of the, I really can't keep hold of that pearl, can I? Into the top of the flower through one of the petals, thread on my pearl, then put the wire back down through the petals at the other side. Now you notice that I didn't pull it tight, so now I've got like a loop, my main stem and the wire going back, and then I'll just hold the pearl in place, seat it properly, and then twist all of these other wires together to make a little stem. And that is a very pretty teeny tiny pearl flower, which can go in and amongst our leaves. And I'll probably make several of these to go on. So remember, just round the round nose pliers, depending on the size of your pliers. If you've got some really little ones, and they're a bit different sized, aren't they? If you've got some little ones, maybe use, like say, pencil or something like that. So I'll just grab those out. There we go. I've got 5 of them. Now let's go back to our pendant. So we've got our firm bar with our crystal in the middle. If it's easier, you can measure this and mark it so that you get the drop right in the middle. I'm going to go for my middle leaf, and I'm going to put my middle leaf slightly to one side, but sort of over the top, and then I'm going to start and wrap the wires around. I'm not doing it tightly. I'm putting curls in, twists, holding with my non-dominant hand while the other hand goes over. So I've got a little loop there, and I'm going to push that round and back so it goes up, and then bring this one around. It's just placing it on so that it's different. Then I can bring the other wire around tight at the end. Don't worry about symmetry. Don't worry about thinking, oh look, I've got to have this one exactly the same angle as the other one. You really don't. So let me just get this on. You must remember, it's not holding anything. As long as this is wrapped onto that firmer stem, it's the firmer stem that's taking all the weight. And I'll just wriggle these wires until my leaves are on in a way that looks nice. Wrap that around there. There we go, nice and natural looking. And then I can wriggle the leaves now so that I get a look that I want, and I'm just going to shape that one down onto the stone. How does that look? Yeah, that's kind of nice. Now then, let's take our little flowers. I'm going to have one in that hole there. How does that look? So you can pop these in, pull them out, try them somewhere else, pop them in, and once you've got them where you want them, you just need to wrap that then around the thick main strong wire in the middle and make sure that it's tight. Okay, alright, that leaf needs just to be moved. You can have leaves crossing over leaves, it really doesn't, yeah. There we go, let's try another one. I wish we put you in there. Yeah. And then just wrap that down around that leaf so you can't see that anymore. I think I just knocked all my beads over. Oh well, don't matter. Give it a wriggle. You notice I'm not bothering with the ends. I'm just wrapping them around and getting them in place first. I'll bother with the ends in a bit. The ends can be sort of one of the last things that I do, so let's wrap that around. There we go, just tuck that in. And we'll have one at the other end. There we are. If you can't pull it tight enough with your fingers, use your pliers. Now let's have a look. How's it looking? Not totally like the picture, but near enough. And just fiddle those leaves. Make sure they're all flat. You don't want anything that's going to poke into your chest. Or let's see where that one can go. Is this my fifth one? I think it is. You can put as many of these on as you want. You could put 5 or 6, or you could, you know, if you wanted, less leaves, more flowers. Quite like that at the top there. Right, yeah, it's quite balanced, is that? So I'm going to start now and tighten all this up. Make sure that all these ends are in. And that they're all trimmed off and smoothed down. Nothing worse than having a little pokey bit somewhere that you've found. There's just a little bit there. It was the end of the 2 wires. You know, where I'd sort of doubled them over on the flower, and one end's shorter than the other, and it's just been awkward, so I've just caught that shorter end and I'm just wrapping that in. It's always easier with the longer bit. So I've caught the shorter end in and then I wrap the longer piece over the top of it to make sure that it's absolutely stable there and it's not going to go anywhere. We'll trim that off. So I've just speeded this bit up now because really it's just me tucking all the ends in, making sure everything's secure and not going to fall off. You really don't want bits falling off, but that you've got no little sharp pieces or ends sticking out. And it really is worth taking that sort of bit of extra time to make sure that your ends are all done and that they're neat and that they are out of the way. I mean, I've speeded this up and reduced it down, but it's probably actually about 10 minutes of work that's just making sure that, you know, all these little ends are caught and held and smoothed, and that there's nothing at all that either yourself, if you're wearing it, or your customer, if you're selling it, is going to feel, because you don't want that. You really don't. So I'm making sure that everything's out of the way. Now this was the end bit, and I've just trailed it over the top as a vine, and I'll finish that off. Same with the other side. Tuck it in, flatten it down, and I think, oh no, I've got another end there. We can just fasten that into that loop. There we go. Now then, that is the central piece of our pendant. Now, you wouldn't have to wear it as a necklace. This could be worn in the hair with a pin going through it, and it could be worn at the back of the head and it would look wonderful. It could be attached to a piece of clothing, all sorts of stuff, but we're going to make this at the moment into a necklace. So I've got some fine chain, and because it is that fine that if we were to put one length of this on it would look unbalanced, I'm going to use double and put 2 pieces on so that we get just chop these. There we go. So I'm going to pop the chain through the hoop and then see what that looks like. See what double of them do. So that would give us like 4 pieces of chain. I think that might be too many. Yeah, I think it looks better with just the one chain doubled. It's really funny, if you get a piece of chain that's sort of double the thickness and you put it in, it can look clunky, but if you put a fine chain through double, it gives it a bit more body, if you like, but doesn't make it look overly heavy. Now obviously that chain is not going to go all the way around your neck, so I've taken a short piece of wire. It's probably 3 inches long. This is 0.8 or 20 gauge, and I'm going to make another leaf. So I'm going to put my bend in the middle, create the leaf shape itself. That was a bit abrupt. Let's have a go with my fingers, cross them over. Come on, nice and slow. Now I'm going to use this leaf as like a joiner for the chain. If you didn't want it, if you just wanted the chain as it's on its own, you don't need to put this in. You could create a chain using you know, a beaded technique. Just bending those out of the way so that I can do the weaving. Anything really. I like the continuity of having, I've got leaves on the main part of the pendant, so I'm going to have a little leaf just like there on the chain as well, and then the same on the other side. So I'm going to get that woven. Let me find some fine wire which will be kicking around somewhere, and then I've just speeded this up because you can always go back and watch that first leaf being made again, but I'm pretty sure that by the time you've got to this point you would have already made 7 leaves, so you know exactly what you're doing by now, I'm sure. So I've just whizzing this along. You can see how normally when I can actually get my hands in both sides that I will just use my right hand, you know, that does all the work, making sure that I'm pushing it down using the pliers. There we are. Push down, round. There we go. I'll finish it off the same way that I did with my other leaves, with a little tiny 2mm Swarovski bead on it as well, so that it does really match in with all the others. Trim that end off and press it down. So I'm putting one end of the wire through the chain. Both pieces of chain need to go through. It can be a little fiddly because it's a very fine chain. Hence the reason I'm using 0.8 as well. If you used anything else, you won't get it through. Now I'm going to create a loop to go around here. So round nose pliers on, wrap over the top, make sure the chain drops down into the loop that we've just created. Round nose pliers over the top of the loop, which will hold it nice and steady with the chain to the left of the pliers, and my wrapping is going to be to the right. Just straighten that up. Right, over the loop, get the leaf out of the way, wrap that around that little end piece there. That will make sure that it's attached to the chain can't come off. It's not just you know, like a head pin where we've just closed the loop up. We've actually wrapped it over the top to make sure that it's nice and secure. And as long as I can keep hold of it, I'll just trim that off and press it down. Okie dokie. Now we don't want it sticking out sideways like that, because it'll look a bit odd. So all you need to do is just bend that loop underneath your leaf. There we go. The loop's disappeared, the chain disappears at the back of the leaf, and it looks really pretty. Let's just get our little bead on our little tail end of wire. There we go. If I can find the hole, they are teeny tiny, these beads. Problem is, if it gets much bigger, it stops looking like a dewdrop and looks more like a bead. So I'll just pop that on and wrap it the end of our little fine wire around. Go on. And wrap it around. If I'd have left myself more wire, there'd have been more to get hold of and wrap, but it's okay. I can manage. Now smooth that down, because we don't want any little sticky bits. And press it in neat. So that's the first part of the chain. Now I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. So I've got this little dual bit and then a leaf. Sit still. And then of course that loop on the other side will join to the rest of the chain, which will go up and around the back of the neck. We'll create that into a loop in a minute. So let's look at doing the other side. Another piece of chain. I cut too many of these anyway. I'll just pop that through and up. Then I need to create another leaf, which I've done. Ta-da! And pop the end. I tend to use up my scraps of wire to make these leaves, so sometimes the wires are a bit longer than you really need, because it's just whatever I've got kicking around, as long as it's the right gauge. Put that through the chain and then create a loop. Round nose pliers on, wrap it over the top, put my pliers over the loop and then wrap the wire between the loop and the leaf, trim it off, press it down, get nice and smooth, then manipulate your leaf so that it lays down over the top of that loop then drops in at the back, and your loop's hidden by your leaf, and so is the top of your chain. Now again, you could go from this point and just put a plain chain on to take you around the neck. You could do some beaded chain to go on. What I'm working out is how long I need this necklace to be. Now for the person that I'm thinking of for this necklace, it's going to need to be about 18 inches. So I take the length of the actual piece that's got the stone and all the work on into account. Then I take into account the chain that I've already added. So the remaining chain that I'm going to use to go around the back of the neck needs to be the difference, which is about 9.5, because it's double. Because I'm going to double. I said I'd knock those beads over at some point, didn't I? So it's going to be double. There we go, just snip through that and then get another one the same length. There we go. Very, very fine chain like this. It's not exorbitantly expensive, so I like using it. There we are. So I am going to loop the chain, and the two ends I'm going to add into my other half of the leaf. I'll put a bead on. Let's have another little crystal going there. Yeah, that's what we want. Pop a crystal there, and then we'll be able to make our loop and pop our chain on round those pliers. What have I done with them? There they are. Right, so right above that bead, make a loop, add the two loose ends of the chain. There we go, there's one. And the next one to our loop. Fasten it off the same way, so round those pliers over the top of the loop we created. Move that into my left hand, and then with my right hand I can grab hold of the end and then wrap that around above the bead, so it presses the bead down towards the leaf, and I can go around there a couple of times. I think it's quite amazing that these little teeny tiny Swarovski beads, even though the fact that they're only 2mm beads, will actually go on to a 0.8 or a 20 gauge wire, and they'll go on quite easily. Not all of them, you may find one or two that don't. I always just put those on one side, but most of them will actually just drop onto that size. So I have got sufficient chain now to go halfway around my neck with a little leaf connector halfway down, just adding a little bit more interest. Because I've looped the chain that way around, I'm just doing the other side now, so I just speeded it up, putting my bead on and my chain and everything. Because I put the loop to the back, it gets less tangled. I don't know why. It's when you do it the other way around, the chain can become sort of caught, and it sort of lifts itself up and hitches so that the necklace doesn't lie as flat. So that's my other half done with my other little leaf connector. Now, your chain at the back now could be, you could put a normal clutch? What's a clutch? a catch, or you could get an S hook and use a fancy S hook. It's one of those things, it's entirely to you. I am going to create a catch with leaves on it because of course everything is having leaves on it. This is actually really pretty for a bracelet catch as well as this, you can use it for that. So a piece of wire, it's what, approximately 5 inches long is a piece of wire. I've bent it in half, halfway down, opened it up ever so slightly, and I'm going to put bend in one side, so I'm a good 1.5 inches away from the ends, bent it in the middle, bent these two bits. Can you see it's like a big M shape? Ow, that hurt. Right, try that again. Tighten that end up for one leaf. Tighten. I must have a funny finger today, it's getting in the middle and getting caught. Tighten that one up for the other leaf. I'm not tightening the one in the middle because that's going to be the loop that's our catch. These two edges, however, will be leaves that sit on the top of the catch and look very pretty. So, create my leaf shape, just using the handle of the pliers. They're sort of squadgier Woodward's pliers handles, so they're kind of nice for doing this with. Go on, round you go. Make another leaf. So I've got two leaves, one going that way, one going that way, both tight at the ends, wires coming down. I need to get these woven, so I'm going to weave these, and I've put my little beads on. Now you can see now it looks a little bit like a deer's head. I've got my loop in the middle, I've got my two leaves, and if I tighten that together, you can see how those leaves just knit in. Take one of the lengths and wrap it around and press it down with my pliers. This will hold everything nice and firm, including the loop that's going to become the hook. Trim that off, press it down nice and tight. There we go. Now I'm going to bend the leaves slightly outwards. Let me just, I need to tighten that up a bit. Can you see how it's a bit teardrop shape? It shouldn't be. If I put the fine bit of my pliers in, I can sort of ease it a little bit so that I can then put my flats over the top and bring it together just a bit. I don't want it tight and flat, but I didn't want it that big. Round those pliers on, bend that into a hook. There we go. So we've got two leaves and a hook. Yeah, nice. Now then, I'm going to bring one of the leaves forward. Let's do that one. So that it comes forward, sort of over the hook, so the hook can't be seen. Like that. And then I think I might leave the other one sticking up like that. Then all I need to do is pop that through the loop of the chain, create a curve in the wire, come on, round you go. And then I'm going to tie it off just like I did with all the others. So it's gone round, it's gone past, round those pliers, over the loop, swap it into my other hand, and then tie that end. Whoops, come here. There we go. Tie that end around. There we go. If you weren't sure what size people are going to want for this, you could add you know, an extra length of a large chain that would go through, but seeing as I know what size it needs to be, I'm okay. But you know, a longer length, so you've got an adjustable piece. And there's your little leaves that go on the back of your chain, leaves part way down, and then the leaf all the way around their pendant. And when it's cleaned up and photographed, looks great. Now we're going to make the matching earrings that go with the necklace, and as you can see there, the picture of the earrings and the ring, but it's just the earrings we're going to make. You're going to need some 20 gauge or 0.8mm round wire, some Swarovski beads and some 0.4, and some ear nuts or ear backs or butterfly backs, whatever you call them. I've got two lengths of wire that are approximately 3 inches long. I'm going to pop a bend in the middle, so about the 1.5 inch mark, and tightening it up. And what I'm doing is I'm actually creating the same leaf shape that we've been creating all along. So I'm popping my pliers into the middle and making those little bends that go either side and crossing it over, and then just going to manipulate that with my fingers so that I get the, come here, the right sort of leaf shape for our earrings. We want them to be a similar size to the ones that we've already done and put on the pendant, so that everything matches in. So I'm going to start with my 0.4 or 26 gauge wire and start at the very tip and do the weaving. Now the weaving is just the same as we did on the pendant, and I'm going round twice, doing a figure of 8 back to the other side all the time, making sure that they stay nice and neat, nice and tight down in the bottom. Pushing this down with my thumb or my index finger, whichever's easiest. When you're weaving with your wire, try and lay the wire over as if it was, oh I don't know, like bending a piece of paper in half, rather than treating it like a thread that you can pull tight. If you treat it more like something that you're folding rather than something that you're pulling, I think you might find that your results become neater because you're laying it down and then bending it over your frame wires. So I'm just putting my little tiny bead over the top so that it looks like a little dewdrop, and then I'm just going to wrap that wire around the tip about 2 or 3 times. There's not very much there for me to get hold of. I'm having to be a little bit careful. It might be easier with the pliers. Remember, there's no right and wrongs to these things. Either use your pliers or your fingers or whatever you feel most comfortable doing. So I'm going to snip that off nice and close. There we go. And then just smooth that down onto the frame. Now the earrings are nice and simple. I've got my nice little woven leaf. I've got a piece of chain which I'm going to add to one of my wires. So I'm going to make this into a curl, and I'm just going to wrap this around. I think it's a bit long. Let me just spiral that and see how, yeah, there's a bit too much of it. So if I open it out ever so slightly, I can then take my snips and pop them in and just trim some of that off. Then I go back in with the round nose pliers, grip hold, and then twist it around. I definitely want it to overlap. I want to make a spiral rather than just a hook. Now I'm going to thread this onto the chain, which is a little fiddly because I'm not going into the end of the chain, I'm going into part way down the chain. Now the chain is as long really as you want it to be. I don't like overly long dangles on earrings, so I tend to make them a bit shorter. So what I've done is I've probably got about 3 inches of chain, and then I have bent it so that 2 inches dangles down on one side and 1 on the other, and that point is where I've added it to my little loop. So I've got 2 different lengths of chain there, and I'm going to add our tiny little dewdrop beads, our little Swarovski beads, but I'm going to put a bend in that wire because these are going to have a stud fitting. So I've just bent it straight back, trim it down a bit because that's too long, and see how sharp that is. Yeah, it needs a file. So just give that end a little file off to make sure it hasn't got a short bit. Now if you didn't want these to be a stud earring, if you wanted these to go onto a French hook, you would just make this into a loop and then attach it to your French hooks. And there is a free skill set tutorial showing you how to make French hooks or ear wires if you want to make your own. Now then, I'm just going to put a little these are called ear nuts, and I like them a lot because they're made out of sort of a silicone, so they're rubbery and they stretch, and that's just going to go on there. Taking a small amount of the 0.4 wire or 26 gauge, I'm just going to add one of my 2 mil Swarovski beads, which I think of as little dewdrop beads because they catch the light like little dewdrops. So slide that down. I'm going to wrap the wire straight over the top of the bead. I'm not going to bother trying to make an end on it. When the wire's this fine, you can wrap it over the bead with no trouble at all. And I'm just going to cross those over and then wrap the shorter piece, whoops, come here, little bit fiddly, but it's worth it. Just wrap that around the longer wire just by twisting the bead, and it'll twist the whole thing round. And I'm going around 2 or 3 times just so I know it's secure. There we go. Let's just smooth that down. If you've started with a bit more wire, you may not be able to smooth down straight away. You may need to trim this off with your snips, because otherwise you'll go on twisting forever. As long as it's held nice and securely, it's not going to go anywhere. Come on, just lie down. There we go. Just squeezing those wraps together so they look a bit neater. I know it's tiny and that most people won't even notice. Then back onto my round nose pliers, and I've wrapped around to get a little loop, and I'm going to thread that through the chain all the way down through the chain so that it hangs on to the bottom, and then I'm going to wrap around. There we go. I'm just holding the loop with the round nose pliers. It's just something to hold it nice and secure, and then wrap back up towards the bead, trim it off and smooth it down. There we go. So the end of that chain now has a little tiny dewdrop bead, so I'm going to do exactly the same with the other end of the chain. So I just passed on to my 26 gauge or 0.4 mil round wire. If you want your beads to be more showy, if you don't want the tiny little dewdrop, you could use a heavier piece of wire, and you could use a larger bead to do this. As I keep saying, there's no rights and wrongs, it's just your own preference. I've made these to be very delicate and really sort of subtle, but do them with a colour and they look amazing. You know, yeah, a really nice sort of, you know, strong blue or a red or a yellow, and they really pop. But because I was thinking bridal, this is why I've stuck to subtle. Let me just nip that down. So looping the other end, now I've fastened the bead on, that will go through the shorter end of my chain. Just pull that apart, thread that through the end of the short end. I mean, if you decided you didn't want any beads on at all, you could leave it without. Put my round nose pliers on over the loop, and then come here, wrap that around going back towards the bead. There we go, trim it off and flatten it down, and there you have a leaf with a nice little tendril at the side, a hanging chain for some movement. Where's my other one? There's my other one. A hanging chain for some movement with the they just don't want to stay in my fingers, do they? No, they don't. They do better in ears. So you've then got matching earrings to go with your necklace. Now if you wanted to do a bracelet, I would say follow the same lines as we did on the chain, but I'm going to show you now how to do a ring to go with it. The ring's lovely, but I'm using slightly heavier gauge wire. Instead of using 0.8, I'm using 1mm or 18 gauge wire. I have about 12 inches or 30 centimeters of wire, and just off center, about an inch off center or 2.5 centimeters off center, I'm putting a bend in to create my first leaf. Exactly the same way that I've done all the other leaves. I have put a bend in, put the pliers over the end to make the nice tight tip of the leaf, gone in either with your fingers or the plier handle, something like that, just to get that leaf shape. Come here. It's a little bit jerky, is that one? I need it a bit smoother. Let me push. Just touch that up with round nose pliers. Again, no right and wrong. It doesn't matter what you use as long as you get the shape that you want. So let me just wriggle. It's a little bit harder because the wire's a bit firmer, because you're going with a slightly heavier gauge wire, so it's not being quite as malleable as the 0.8 or the 20 gauge, so it takes a little bit more wriggling, but believe me, it's definitely worth it. So I'm checking the size to make sure that leaf is not bigger than the width of my finger, because if it gets too big, it ends up sitting over the fingers and onto the other fingers. I don't really want that, so there we go. That's about the right size. Let me just fiddle with that and bend those wires back, you know, just like we did with the others. At the point where they cross, I'm gripping on and I'm bending the wires there, like so. Now I'm going to weave it, and it will look just like the others, but there's 2 leaves on a ring, so I want that to be a little bit further down on that side. So there we go, and I'm bending the other way. So I've got 1 leaf sort of poking out to the left, and then I've got 1 leaf that's poking off and towards the right, and I'm just going to shape that, and then I will be bending that top wire, this one, outwards. Let me just make sure that these are similar shape. They don't need to be identical, because of course the leaves, and you don't get 2 leaves that are identical. If one's slightly larger than the other, it really doesn't make a lot of difference. I just want the shape right. I want that sort of fatness in the body of the leaf. And where they cross, I'll grip with flat pliers and bend the wire back up. So when I wriggle these, I've sort of got 2 leaves and a straight wire going through the middle, which we're going to create our ring shank out of. So I've woven one of them, and I'm going to start now and weave the other. Like I said, the weaving's just like the rest of the tutorial. I'm going round twice, doing a figure of 8 to the other side. It's a little bit easier actually on this one, because the firmer wire gives you it doesn't move about as much. So let's have a look now at my beads. I could just put the single 2mm bead on there if I wanted, but this is a ring and I want something a little bit more showy, so I have got here, I had here a 5mm Swarovski crystal. Let's see what that looks like. That looks really sweet in the middle, but I think it needs something at that end. So if I put some of the 2mm ones on, let's have a look. 1, 2, they're all over the table now. 3, it'll take me ages to pick them all up this afternoon. Oops, come here. If we put 3 of the little tiny 2mm on, I could leave it in a little row, but I think I like that one. Come here, in the middle, there, like that. that. That's rather pretty. So I'm just going to wrap that end of the wire around the thicker wires, just like we did with the other leaves. There we go. Trim that off and then press it down onto the wire, and then the other side. I don't think I need another big one on the other side, and I think I'll just have little ones. 1, 2. It would help if I could find the hole. There we go. 3. You don't have to use Swarovski. You could use whatever you wanted. You could use little silver beads on here, gold beads, any beads, you know. But I've put 4 of the 2 mils on, and I'm going to lay them up the bead. That looks nice. And then wrap. Get back in there. Can I take another one? It might take another. Let's see if I can get 5 on. Yes, it will. That's better. And we'll wrap that wire around the 1 mil sort of frame wire, if you like, and I'm wrapping that just around to hold everything nice and secure, nice and tight. About 4 or 5 times, and then I'm going to trim that off and smooth it down with my pliers. So that there's nothing to catch. So I have 2 leaves with crystals on. I'm going to get my ring mandrel. I've already worked out where I need to be on the mandrel, and I've marked the mandrel. I can then put my leaves onto the mandrel. Sorry, not quite in shot. Let me move it up a bit. There we go. And bring the wires around. So the wire that was at the top is staying at the top. The one that was at the bottom is staying at the bottom. I'm going underneath the leaf, and then underneath the leaf with that one, and then I'm going to wrap around. Keep pulling. There we go. And then I'm going to fasten the wires off by going through. Just trim some of that length off, there was too much there to fight with. Through the middle of the ring, grab hold and pull that through nice and tight, and wrap that round underneath sort of the line of the leaves. Get that tightened up. Come on. Little bit fiddly, don't rush it. Now, other side. Let's just trim that one off. I trim off on the top. If you've seen other ring tutorials, you know that I always trim off on the top, because I don't want any sharp scratchy bits on the inside of the ring. Then I'm going to take that through the middle. That's it. All the way around. Bring it back up to the top. Like I said, keep it tight, don't rush. Ease it into where you want it. Trim off the excess. And then flatten down any little bit. Now, there's our ring. But put it back on the mandrel, and then I'm going to move the leaves a little bit just so they're sitting more across, and then bend them over the mandrel so that they are shaped into a nice curve. Then when you slip it on your finger, it sort of tucks around the finger, laying diagonal across the hands. Really pretty. So I've got my necklace, my ring, and the earrings, all in matching styles. You don't need to do them all, they do very well as individual pieces, but as a full set they're really lovely to have. So another picture of the pendant, one of the ring, and one of the earrings and the ring. I really hope you enjoyed this one. It was a long one, but I can't wait to see what you've made on the forum. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wrapping!